drugs or alcohol or whatever, just to numb the sensitivity that comes with being an artist. Because you have to keep your ears and your eyes open, all your senses open to all the possible stuff that goes around you. You're like a sponge sucking in all the possible information, and then when you're filled with that, it just bleeds out of you, and hopefully bleeds out in a way that you can be. It can be a cathartic process for the artist, and then it can be hopefully very cathartic for the person who sees or hears the piece of art. And it's not something you're trying to do. It's something you have to do to be able to exist, I guess. That's the reason why I do music. That's how I started. I didn't know how to cope with the world, and then I found an instrument. And through that, I realized that I'm able to cope with the world and its evils a bit better through writing songs, and that keeps me safe. That's the comforting part, and it's worked for me since I've been maybe. I wrote my first song after my big heartbreak when I was about 13 years old, so it's been nearly 20 years I've been writing that stuff. So yeah, I wouldn't exist without that little piece of wood there, which is incredibly interesting in a way. Well, I guess to a certain extent, it's also, everybody is an artist in a way, and everybody's got their story. Everybody is a living, breathing, piece of art. Everybody's got great stories. Everybody, and it is the way of the world to a certain extent. You have to be, if you decide to have kids or whatever, you have to make sacrifices. You can't do, life's about compromises at the end of the day. But as little you can, compromise, the better. That's Charles Baudelaire. That's Charles Bukowski. That's a Finnish writer called Timo Mukka. His stuff's never been translated. But he's a guy who used to live in the middle of the woods in Lapland in Finland, and he lived only 29 years. He looked like 60 when he died. I don't know, there's stories about him being a, crazy alcoholic, just, downing bottles and bottles of vodka and just writing in a manic frenzy. But he also had a family, and I heard that he was a great father, and he was a visual artist as well, and he wrote about, the life in little tiny towns and villages in Finland. They're very extremely sexual and very depressing, but he, very, very few writers write down their thoughts as they really are. Yeah. You can tell when you read somebody, and you can actually tell that it's not, he hasn't been editing himself to be more appreciated in literary circles in a way. I'm not saying that it's dumbed down. I'm saying that, you can instantly see the flow, that is a flow, and the brush strokes get heavier by the end of a sentence, or they don't, or lighter. Yes. And that's how he wrote, and he's just one of my idols in a way of being, being a father, good father, and a supporter of the family, and then still living a very passionate life and being able to get so much out of himself that makes life worth living for. So, I guess it's one of the things that his stuff is so. It's so very Finnish, and not even Finnish, it's more Lappish. So the language is really hard to translate because there's a lot of words I don't get because it's old school, and it's like a lot of dialects that have very few people use. So it's very, very hard to get the whole vibe down. And I think that some of his work has been translated into, I guess, German or Swedish, but I don't know how well it would do in English. It's like, those like rural writers here in America, when you're writing about a certain very specific place, and you have to write it in a very certain specific way to get the actual mood of living in there. And nobody who's ever been there can get the entire right feel out of it. Well, I spent a couple of weeks actually in Lapland to write Venus Dune. So I rented a cabin in the middle of the woods and just went there and ended up, you know, hooking up with all the local reindeer herders and listening to their stories and taking helicopter rides over the mountains, and wrote a few songs. I actually wrote the basic ideas for Sleepwalking Past Hope back in Lapland, and for Cyanide Sun as well. And I can hear the Lappish influence in those two tracks on Venuston, because for me they sound, you know, what the right word for it would be, they sound really widescreen, like really cinematic, and really, there's like a big landscape behind the music. It's a very wide angle, and I'm really proud of those things. I can really hear the, you know, the sound of the North. So I was thinking of maybe going back there for the next album. But it's, you know, people tend to keep very much to themselves. You know, they're not very open, not a lot of chit chat going around, and they're very honest in a way that there's no small talk, and they don't bullshit you. So let's say if I walk into a bar, somebody can. A guy can walk up to me and say, "Are you a good guy?" If I say, "Yeah, I consider myself a fairly good guy," okay, in that case, just come along and sit down with us. So it's that direct. Yeah. There's no bull whatsoever. And I love the honesty in that, because it kills, you know, you kill a lot of time by trying to please people, trying to, you know, have the mask on. And back in the North, they don't care about that. And that's the cool thing about it. There's something very unique. But nowadays also, you know, because of so many things being more liberal, it means that kids have to stretch further and further to make themselves noticed. You know, if you know what I'm saying, you know, culture and all that, you know, there's not so many taboos anymore, and obviously kids are always searching for taboos. You know, if we just think of, let's say, intoxicants, you know, back in the day, you know, weed was a like cool little illegal thing. It's nothing nowadays. Meth is nothing nowadays. Cocaine is nothing nowadays. And smack's not interesting for anybody. You're just not off. You know, so they're searching for something. They're searching for, you know, what would they call, like Georges Bataille, like transgressional literature, something that rips the reality around you apart, and you can restructure it, you know, through the way you clothe yourself, through the way you live your life and all that. Everybody, you know, the search for individuality is becoming more obsessive at all times. People want to be so different. You know, people just, you know, rise to the barricades and trying to hop over the boundaries to see if the grass is greener on the other side. You know, it's just, a lot of people don't do that on a psychological or on an intellectual level. You can still get a lot by just reading. You know, a lot of thoughts and a lot of ideas. A lot of people seem to, you know, I'm not saying everybody, but seems to have the obsession that you have to, you know, show your individuality and your crazy identity through outer means. And that's not important, I guess. You know, just rather, you know, shut up and say one really good sentence once every 10 years and you'll be a god. And to a lot of people, you know, not saying that you should do that, but it's just, there's various ways of doing that. But, you know, that is kind of crazy, and that's what I'm, you know, obviously, especially in America, if you're just watching telly, what's on there, it's getting ridiculous. All the reality shows and everything. Nothing's taboo anymore. So it's, what are they looking for next? What's going to be the next kick? Murder? Or, well, like, just suicide is going to be a kick or something. And he has, in, you know, in the near past. Well, that was a sad thing. He was this introverted, it seems, I don't know that case very well, but introverted 18-year-old guy with tendencies towards neo-Nazism. And he was really in his own cocoon, you know, didn't know much about the outside world, and he just, through whatever information, got the idea that he has the right to kill people, and he's doing that for the purification of, not necessarily the race, but for mankind. I don't know on what kind of spiritual level he was working on, but it was kind of weird. It's tough to get guns in Finland, and we don't have any, you know, metal detectors at schools or anything like that, because Finland's considered to be a very, you know, safe country. And a lot of people do have guns, but most of the people are, you know, northerners who use them for hunting, you know, and or whose hobby is just, you know, shooting at a track. So